Hello, everyone. This is Claudiu Murgan, the host of the Spiritual Inspire Show. And my guest today is Dr. Jason Loken. Jason was here before. Hello, Jason. How are you?
I'm doing great. Well, thanks for having me back.
Yes, it's been a pleasure first time. So we thought that there is more to talk about. So let me refresh the memory of our viewers with a little bit of presentation about yourself. So with over 20 years in natural healthcare and 15 years plus of post-secondary education, Dr. Jason Loken is committed to help people reach their optimal health goals. Dr. Loken is a naturopathic doctor, an osteopathic manual practitioner, a former registered massage therapist, and is currently completing his PhD in integrative medicine. Dr. Loken is former professor of the Orthopedics and Physical Medicine program at the Canadian College of Naturopathy. He's the author of two books, Letters That Move the World, Intentional Acts of Gratitude, and Understanding to Knowing, Unlocking Your Path to Optimal Health. So, Jason, since our first interview, a lot of things have happened in or changed in your life. Please give us an update.
I think a lot of things have changed in everybody's life, but yeah, ours particularly, we basically packed everything up. We were living in Toronto, and we had decided this last while, like probably the last probably 2.5 years, my wife and I have really created a big focus on joy. And as sort of maybe funny as that might sound, but it's like we've really taken that to heart, and really with this idea of like, what does life actually mean if we use joy as one of the real founding principles that we want to use as our compass to navigate where we're going to go. And so when we started to do that, it really shifted. We started really asking ourselves, like, what are we really enjoying doing? What brings more joy, more fulfillment into our lives? And a lot of times when you start to do that, then you got to be open to making some changes that actually, if you're really going to listen to that. And so we had for a while been wanting to move out to Vancouver Island here in British Columbia. My family's kind of out this way a little bit more. And when everything started kind of going down through the summer and just lots of restrictions, and it just really brought up for us a bit more of like, okay, where do we really want to be, right? When you start to feel like where you are starts to be pulled away, or you're getting things are getting taken away from you in a certain way, it helps you redefine a little bit on what you really want and what you miss. And so we really wanted to be more in nature, to have more space, to have for our kids to have more experience directly with nature particularly. And so we basically just started to decide what we're going to do, and we sold the house and we packed everything up and we moved out here to the West Coast, and we're now living in Souk, which is about maybe 45 minutes outside of Victoria, and we're just in a beautiful part of the world, and there's deers that walk by on a regular basis, and we're near the forest and we're near the ocean. So the kids love it, and it's much more rural than where we were, and it's just been wonderful. And I practice mostly through telemedicine now, outside of running episodes in the podcast and everything.
Yeah, so you're closer to your high standard of joy right now, maybe closer to 5 or, up there.
Well, it is so true. And I was talking to my wife about this, and I said, I really do feel like in a lot of ways that when we act with a certain aspect of faith and courage, I feel like we get rewarded. I really do. And I find that, at least from my life, I feel like every time we have really been drawn to do something and we sort of have this faith and this courage to act on what our gut and our heart are telling us to do, I really do feel like we get rewarded with it. And in where we are now, I feel like, yeah, our overall quality of life has gone from good to even better. And just for us, for what that means, part of it is like, that's not for everybody. Not everybody wants that. For me, I really wanted to have more time with my kids, more time in nature, more time that's like off the hamster wheel a little bit, like that's a little bit slower down, so that for us, we can spend more time connecting to ourselves to get a better sense of where we are, connect more to our spirituality. I mean, you can't do that wholeheartedly when you're running on a hamster wheel and you're just trying to go, make things work. You can't get off of it. You need to have that parasympathetic downtime to be able to have those types of connections. And so that was tied in with our concept of joy. And so that's basically what we started to do.
Yeah, it was a courageous act. And in fact, you step out of your comfort zone and you had the, let's say, the acknowledgement and um, the 100% participation of the family. And this is what's important. So everyone is happy at the same time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's been great. So I'm so glad that we made that shift.
Um, Last time we had the interview, we talked about when we think at health beyond the physical body, we have a much broader perspective to life, and we enjoy living. As you said, we move outside the 9 to 5 job, and we have a different perspective. So, is this the reason why you are pursuing integrative medicine certification?
For the most part, I've just been super curious. It's like ever since I can remember, I've been interested in health and really in health in sort of more the natural sort of therapies or some of more the ancient traditions. So, I mean, I remember going through growing up, and I would go to the library and I'd look for books on acupuncture, and I would like massage acupuncture points on my parents' feet, or my grandparents would do that when we would go over and visit them. They'd do reflexology on me. So I was just fascinated by all this. And then I started martial arts when I was really early on. And our karate instructor was very much aware of a lot of these things. And we would actually take courses on things for like touch for health, like way back when, which was one of the foundations for things like applied kinesiology. And you'd run meridians and you do pressure points and all these things. And he would have us take courses on that so that we could sort of tune each other up before competition. So that we, as our, my teammates, we kind of check each other out, make sure we were all strong and ready to go in and perform as best as we could. So I think I got interested in that early on because I had these mentors that showed it to me outside of what I feel like I came in with. I came in with an interest in this stuff. And really since then, I just want to understand the truth. Really, that's it. And I keep finding different pieces of it. And then the more, and most people that have done lots of schooling, you kind of find, I think if you remain open, you realize the more you learn, the more you realize you really don't know. And then that puts you on a bit of a quest of just wanting to really understand what's going on. So, naturopathic medicine was amazing and it opened up so many doors. And then osteopathy was this other massive piece that opened up so many pieces of it. And integrated medicine, in my mind, keeps evolving, even what it means for me. A lot of times integrated medicine, people think, well, how do you blend like just conventional medicine with almost more like naturopathic medicine? How do those two merge? And even outside of that, it's so much more than that. It's such a bigger aspect that I think as we keep evolving as human beings and we learn more about who we are and what even our potential is, to me, that keeps expanding what integrated medicine means. What parts do we start to pull together? And it's really looking at physical, spiritual, mental, emotional, archetypical, all of these different things. And how do you work all these things together to ultimately unlock what I believe is our true potential, whatever that is for each individual. But I think it's much more than what we currently can even fathom.
So in fact, the curriculum includes energy healing and herbs and any other type of natural approach?
A lot of where I think things are moving with medicine is we have been in a construct that's been so biochemical and science-based, which has been great, and we've learned tons of information from that. And I was really into that. I wanted to understand like all the biochemical pathways, all of the cofactors that make things work from a nutritional point of view and all that stuff. And I still find that interesting, but I'm just finding I'm naturally being drawn more to things around vibration and frequency and intent and light. And like these are really powerful and they're subtle and there's very less chance of getting side effects to these types of medicines. And so, when you look at it, this is your physical layer here, and these types of medicines I'm talking about, you're working up here. So you're trying to change certain things much higher up the chain that eventually filter down and affect the physical. Where most medicine, and even integrated medicine for the most part at this point in time, still focuses mostly on the physical, but using natural kind of modalities to integrate. And my perspective is it's going to incorporate that plus a whole lot more that's much higher up the chain. And we're going to realize that's where we are ultimately the best physician for ourselves. When we start to take care of all of this stuff, how we think, what our belief structures are, what our emotional situation is like, making choices based more out of joy than based more out of like fear or worry or concern. I think these things naturally start to fall into place. We unlock that ability for our body to take care of itself that it's designed to do.
Yes, and it's interesting. Today I look at a book by Susun Weed, Susun Weed, Susun Weed. Yes, she lives in Upper New York, and she wrote this book about herbs around her garden, around her, in the forest, around her house, and she says that we can heal ourselves or most of our diseases with herbs if we know how to combine them, how to mix them, what the proportions are. So he wrote an entire book based on her experience, like 25 or 30 years of healing people with herbs. And it is
Mm-hmm.
her belief that each part of the world has herbs and trees and fruits which can heal us, heal humans living in that part of the world.
And it makes a lot of sense. I was recently doing an interview on our podcast, on Inspire Health podcast, and I was interviewing a lady named Katie Hess, and she runs a company called Lotus Way, and it's particularly on flower elixirs. So kind of like people might be familiar with Bach flower remedies at one point, and so this is just another type of variation. But I mean, they're the most potent ones I've ever tried, and it's really neat because she said something that was fascinating about plants, the way she broke it down. She said, when you look at plants, they kind of break them in these different pieces, and the root is almost more designed to treat the body. And the essential oils are more designed around sort of immune system. And the flower elixirs are more designed around sort of the mental, emotional, the heart, the soul of the plant. And so they all have their different sort of specialties, right? And by taking things like these flower elixirs, you're working at this level up here. So you're working with subtle energies that then eventually trickle down and create big, profound effects down here. And I feel like that's the area that has been worked with probably the least effectively. Um, it's an area that people are working with more. Even in a lot of trauma research, they're realizing that it actually has to come back to the body as opposed to just working intellectually and whatnot. But I think things like that type of medicine have a really profound impact. So, and it makes sense that the local environment would be conducive to heal whatever those people are going to require. We find that when we talk about the microflora, it's important to eat like when you can. It's why it's so important to eat homegrown or local produce, because the bacterial flora that's there actually that you get from the dirt and the soil communicates with the microflora in your gut. And there's like an information transfer that I don't think we can even quite comprehend yet. And she was also saying that I thought was fascinating. She was saying, when you actually go out and walk in the forest, the plants actually send out certain phytochemicals that are perfect for what you require at that point in time. And I was like, that makes so much sense, because when we think about a baby nursing from the mother's breast milk will modify itself depending on what that child needs. So if it detects that that child is maybe got a bit of a cold, it will modify the breast milk, upregulate certain immunoglobulins and immune system factors to support that child's health. So it totally makes sense that Mother Nature would do the exact same thing for all of us.
Yeah, there is an intelligence which we don't want to recognize and acknowledge, and the plants are taking care of us. And again, is that symbiosis which some of us talk about, and we don't want to go in nature. We still stay separate because we think that staying in front of the TV is much more enjoying than going outside for a walk in the forest. Yes, for sure.
I just think what happens is it's like when you become disconnected from it, then it's like those things are seductive, like, and they're designed to be seductive. No different than when people get hooked on junk food. right? I mean, they're designed to kind of hijack your senses. So then whole food and natural food, it takes a while for people to actually develop a taste for it again when they've been hijacked their taste buds from like additives, preservatives, high sugar, all of these different things. They're designed to do it. Like they have experts in, PhDs in chemistry on designing things to basically have that effect. Well, guess what? Mass media and everything is exactly the same way. They've got things designed to hijack your senses. And it goes well beyond that, I think, too. But if you're inundated with that for a long time, then the natural stuff almost doesn't grab your attention so much until you literally like detox from it and you get away from it, and then you start to immerse yourself in nature more. You spend more time there, do some forest bathing, spend some time walking with your feet on the grass, get down to bodies of water when you can. And after a bit, that becomes your real new normal. Like that's when you start to feel your whole nervous system settle down, and then you crave it. Like then it feels really off when you don't get a chance to be in it. But it's like anything. It's like if you're not around it and you've been disconnected from it, it's hard to appreciate it until you can start to get reconnected back to it again.
Yes, and I can share two moments when my kids were so ashamed with me. We were walking in the forest, and at the edge of the forest was an apple tree. So the apples were green, and I grew up with, apples. Used to pick them up of the tree and
Yep.
eat them before they were ripe, and the same with the cherries and everything else. And when I did that while walking with my kids, they were maybe 8 years old and 3 years old, something like that. They're so appalled. What are you doing? You are not allowed to eat that. It's not washed. And, a whole theory at that age. And the second time was last year when we went to the forest. Now they are 22 and 16. And I took off my shoes and I walked barefoot for the entire length of the forest. And initially they were embarrassed because people will pass by and they will smile at me by being barefoot. And in time they realize that it's beneficial, it's okay, they don't have to be ashamed, but their initial reaction was, whoa, no one else is doing it, why are you doing it, so I think we have to go beyond, as we discuss, our comfort zone and try something else in nature at least.
Yeah, I think it's great. It's so important to have kids be a part of that so that that is just what's familiar with them, right? I mean, it's like people always um, run into troubles when they run into anything that's not familiar to them. So it's like if something that's maybe not so healthy is just familiar, doesn't mean it's right. It just means it's become familiar and comfortable. And then we tend to have discomfort when we do anything that's not familiar. So I know like with our kids, it's like they spend lots of time with their shoes off outside, and they will spend lots of time. I mean, where we are, there's like fruits and stuff like that all over the place. So we'll go down and we'll go pick a bunch of blackberries or pick some cherries from some of the trees in different places. And they also get used to the fact that you don't have to wash that stuff as long as it's not sprayed. As long as you're getting something that's natural, that's not sprayed, really, you're better off to not wash it. You get a lot of benefits from all of that. It's like go to your garden, if you can have a garden, just pick your leaves and just, maybe rinse a couple bugs off. But other than that, it's like, you're ready to go. I mean, there's a lot more benefits to doing that.
Yes. So let's take a notch up now. And, without getting into the politics of the moment, I'd like to mention a concept that most of us heard being mentioned at Davos, transhumans. And I have to admit, I also wrote about it in my latest book, Crystal Cloud. I imagine a whole debate between a neurosurgeon, the one who, in fact, applied the crystal implants, and the church official. And I think I created an interesting twist from that discussion. But as a doctor, how do you see this type of human evolution?
So tell me, just break that down a little bit more for me. So transhuman, like, are you talking about where we're looking at origins? Where do we come from? Like,
No, types of implants we will all get in order to enhance our senses, our storage capability, our, brain capability. So we are kind of a,
almost like AI stuff that's,
yes.
yeah. Well, I think this is really interesting. And what always comes to my mind is I remember I was at a Greg Braden workshop once with my wife, And one of the messages he said, because we were talking about, basically they were talking about a chip that they were looking at wanting to put in the brain that then you can operate your devices from and everything through the way you think about it. And a lot of people think this stuff is like cutting edge and amazing. And his message was, don't be so willing to give away your humanism, right? And the message was that ultimately, whatever technology is coming up is what we are actually inherently able to do. But the more that we give it away to technology because it's faster and it might be easier, we keep sort of like downsizing what our abilities actually are. Because if you don't use them for a long time, then they're going to disappear. So even like some of these things, and I mean, gosh, like read a book by like Dean Radin, like Real Magic or something, where he talks about things like remote viewing, and he talks about telepathy, and he talks about these different things. I mean, these are real. People do this. We have just lost our ability to do it if we're not practicing it. And so technology in a lot of ways, I think, mimics what human beings are able to actually do, but they are making it sort of a little bit easier for the average person, but I think we're watering down our capacities over time. So I think it's always interesting, and I don't think technology is inherently good or bad, but I think depending on who's behind it and the intent behind it is what dictates anything. Just like a gun I don't think is good or bad, but depending on what people want to do with it, that's what dictates, kind of the level of consciousness of the person running the show with it. So whenever I see technology and these types of things, it makes me think like, oh, cool. I didn't even think about that as something that I'm capable of doing. So then it opens my brain up to kind of think, well, what else is possible? So, I mean, like recently, like I remember doing a remote viewing course, and I'm working on remote viewing because I think like, why not? I really think for me, a lot of this is we just need to break through our limiting beliefs. I mean, the bottom line is we do not know much of anything for fact. And even when we do know facts, they change over, just give them enough time and your facts will change. So it's like, in a lot of ways, I think our world is a little bit based on an illusion anyways, because nobody really knows what we think. Everybody wants solid ground underneath them, but that's not really the way it is. So in my mind, it's like, how big can I expand my box to let in different possibilities? And the more I understand about how quantum physics works is we live in a world of infinite possibilities. And whatever we focus on is we're going to increase the likelihood of that limited amount of possibilities. So if I can expand my awareness to even more, whether I completely believe it or not, but at least start to entertain it, I'm opening up the door for different possibilities. And if I want to live a bigger, more expansive life, you kind of have to do that.
Yes. I mean, look at the bright side. If you succeed in remote viewing, you always have a job at CIA. They are looking for this type of people.
All part of the master plan.
And you know what? I am kind of obsessed with increased consciousness. And in my book, it was a trick. You implant the chip in your eye, but that is connected with the pineal gland. And even if you do it to have fun and play online games and have virtual sex, in the end that pineal gland will act like an antenna and will increase your consciousness, and you realize how many bad decisions you made in the past, and you have a chance to correct what you've done. So in the end, I use that in a positive context with a positive twist. So I think I'll be forgiven.
Well, and then it's just it still is like, I think there's just different ways to do things, right? What I'm really curious about right now is I just want to know what is the human being capable of doing, right? And so that's kind of been, I think, our quest this last while is just expanding what we think is possible. Because if you see like some people doing certain things, then it's possible, it's in there somewhere. And I think that they've just done certain things to be able to facilitate that skill set or whatever it might be. They've practiced in a certain way. So it just makes me curious as to what are we able to do. Sometimes I think technology can be a great adjunct to things, and sometimes I think that it can kind of detour us from what we're capable of doing ourselves. Like
Yes.
even pineal gland. I mean, there's different ways. There's meditations you can do to try and, like basically unlock the pineal gland. There's certain things you should probably avoid that have been talked about to be related to kind of almost, creating troubles with the pineal gland. Like that's part of the thing with fluoride around stuff too. And then there's a whole work by Dr. Todd, I can't remember his last name right at the moment, but he did a whole thing on pineal tone. So then he's even looking at different sound tones that help to unlock the pineal. And yeah, you're right. The pineal gland is like an antenna to a lot of other stuff. So I think that's an essential part of being able to tap into that Akashic field, or to tap into that universal consciousness, this field of ultimate and unlimited information. These are all the different types of practices that we do to try to allow ourselves to connect to that, right?
Yes, and for those interested in, plant medicine, Wilca is one substance which can unlock your pineal gland, I think, if taken multiple times. So
yeah, I think it's neat. I mean, it makes sense to me that nature would have the answers to most of that stuff. And then in a combination of getting into, like, I mean nature by like our breath work, right? The way we take care of our body, even physical alignment of our body, plant medicines, nature, fresh air, like all of these different things. I think the capacity is there within what we have. And sometimes I think man-made technologies can benefit certain things, and sometimes I think they detract from things. And ultimately, I think that's individual depending on where you are and what you're interested in.
yeah, and another joke about breath course and breath work. When I told a friend that we purchased such course, Soma breath, he asked us, "You paid money to learn how to breathe? You are breathing already." So it's a different level of understanding of what breath can do for us, what doors can open for us.
Absolutely. It's like it's not breathing to just stay alive, it's breathing to thrive and to tap into different aspects of consciousness. Breathing's a really powerful way to do that.
Yeah. Going back to your book, let's talk about the concept of the law of intention and power of awareness. I would like to expand on those two concepts.
Yeah, so I think a lot of people are probably aware of the law of attraction. That was kind of brought out a lot when people watched the movie The Secret, and I think that brought a lot of light to it. Although I think it was a really watered down picture of what the real law of attraction actually is. If people want to really understand the law of attraction, you need to read books by the Hicks, by Esther Hicks, and the Teachings of Abraham. That's really where the law of attraction came from, and they go into more detail than what The Secret did. So whether people are trying to get like their next new car or the next best relationship or whatever it is, I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with that. But I feel like what happens is people are losing sight of what's maybe behind that. And that's kind of where the law of intention comes in. It's, if I want a new car, it's sort of understanding yourself as to, okay, what's behind that? Why do you want it? Do I want it because it makes me feel good because I can show off to my friends? Or do I like just the feel of driving a really amazing automobile and what that feels like to drive it? All of those are fine. It's just understanding why. But if I want it because it's going to make me feel a little bit better because maybe it might create envy in my friends, or because it's a prestige for me. If I understand that, then I'm better off to come back a little bit and connect to what it is I'm actually wanting. So maybe that might be, well, what I really want is I want to feel more confident. Maybe that's it. I want to feel more self-worth, right? As an example. And then you're better off to connect more to what that actual intent is, and then be open to allowing that to show up in whichever way it's going to show up. I use the example sometimes like, because what happens is so many times we get very stuck on a certain picture, and then we don't open ourselves up to all the millions of other ways that it might show up. So it's like if someone wants $1 million and someone comes up and gives them a bag of diamonds and they're like, no, I'm holding out for the cash because that's how I saw it. You just miss out on all of these other opportunities. And I think probably one of the biggest ways this happens is with relationships. You know, people get very stuck on, okay, I want them to look this way. I want them to be this tall. I want them to have this much, like blah, 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 all these things. And then you've kind of narrowed yourself of the infinite possibilities to one specific area, and you could be missing all of these other amazing things because you're just not connecting to the underlying feeling of like, I want to be loved. I want to feel a deep sense of connection. And however that's going to show up, then I'm open to that, and however that's going to be. I think it sort of takes things one step deeper. And I remember Dr. David Hawkins, who was one of my main mentors, and he was calibrating the different levels. And he was saying that law of attraction still calibrated fairly high, but intention calibrates higher. And so in my mind, when you can align yourself with a higher field of consciousness, the power to change your life and those around you and interact with the world just levels up a little bit more. You've got more inherent power than in lower levels of consciousness. So if you come from, say, a place of greed, right, or low self-worth as the beginning of sort of the ripple on what you're wanting to get something from, you're not going to have very much success in actually getting what you want. You're probably going to bring back more of what you're starting with. So it's a bit of a way of being more aware of the underlying reasons behind why we do things.
Yes, and sometimes maybe even the energy we put behind of what we want, it's much higher when we are not aligned with our goal and with greed, as you said. But if it's in our own interest to get what we want, then it will be much, much easier.
It totally is. And this is even like when I called our podcast Inspire Health Podcast. What I like about inspiration is it's this difference between almost motivation and inspiration. Like motivation, I feel like that's you pushing the rock up the hill using everything you got to try and get to the top. And inspiration, I feel like it's being pulled up and you're hanging on for the ride. Like you can't help but not go up that way. And it doesn't feel like work anymore. It doesn't mean you're not doing stuff, but the feeling behind it feels almost effortless and exciting and inspired, as opposed to like, I just got to put my time in. I got to push it up. Like, I feel like there's such an easier way to do things, but it all comes with being aware of why you're doing it and aligning with it properly.
Yes, and the parallel to the comparison you made between cash and diamonds, in fact, it was done for real. Someone tried to offer people on the street to choose between 10 ounces of silver and a bar of chocolate or whatever. And they, like 90% choose the chocolate bar. They didn't understand the value of silver, that they can sell the silver and get 100 chocolate bars and they can last for 2 weeks. So that's why
That's funny.
yes, there is no proper education, let alone on the spiritual side and health side, but not only on the financial side. There is no proper education in school for people to understand value and the difference between money, which is silver and gold, and currency, which is printed valueless paper, you know?
That's really funny. Well, and I think it also is a testament to like immediate gratification. You know, we're kind of a society that wants to feel something right now in the moment, and it's very much perpetuated that way and everything. So, you know, a chocolate bar, you get that right away and you can enjoy it and you're done. Where the other stuff, maybe you have to then try and figure out who to sell it to. Do you want to, so it's kind of funny, but I agree with you. Like value has been, I think, very mixed up.
Yeah. Another line caught my attention in your book. All of us matter. And you wrote the book in 2016, if I'm not mistaken. So this statement encompasses us under, you know, the concept of one humanity. We are all connected. We are all in this mess together, and only together and united we can get out of it. And still slogans like, you know, Black Lives Matter or Indigenous Lives Matter or White Lives Matter still keep us divided. Why we cannot overcome this, you know, threshold of isolation, which, you know, is enhanced by another statement of social distancing, in fact, which should be physical distancing while socially being close.
Mm-hmm. I know it's like you definitely, if you're aware of those things, when you hear this different terminology, it always kind of strikes a chord. I mean, and part of this is, I think, when people slow down get into that parasympathetic rest and digest part of their nervous system, these things, you resonate with these things or not. Like it's this intuitive knowing comes up with people, and certain words or certain statements or certain actions just kind of like, you feel them right away. And without trying to intellectually understand or talk yourself out of it, I think it's important for people to get a felt sense of what works and what doesn't work for them. There's generally been lots of division, and the reason for division is I think ultimately it's easy to get agendas through and to control people when we fight amongst ourselves. People don't have to do a whole lot of work to try and control people when you're already fighting amongst yourselves. So I don't resonate with anything that really creates division. It's actually a telltale sign for me that anything that's coming from a place that creates division is not a high level of consciousness, because it's not. I understand where sometimes these things come. It's like if groups have been oppressed, then it's like you're trying to bring light, and I understand kind of where that comes from. I just think ultimately the whole picture has to be something that creates more unity. That's the only way out of anything. And so anytime you get caught up in like battling rights and wrong and sides and stuff, it's like I feel like it just doesn't allow anything to change. And so the statement, all of us matter, part of that originally came from because I feel like a lot of people, we are so much more powerful than we think we are, right? And I keep feeling like this concept keeps like day by day getting me excited, and it becomes so much more expansive, especially now. I feel like, depending on what information you're paying attention to, you're either feeling like your world is getting smaller, fearful, and contracted, or it's getting excited, expansive, and you're looking forward to what's coming. And so all of us matter is this idea that every single person impacts the level of the sea. That's the idea. And it's like sometimes we think like, oh, well, what role do I play into this? It's like I'm just this one person, these billions of people. And I think also that line of thinking is what keeps people not doing things. But if you actually start to think that you are infinitely powerful and that you do have a say, and we've seen that. Look at lots of different people in history that have cast their stone in the global pool and have created massive ripples of change in the world. We like to make them bigger than life themselves, and they become these massive heroes, and they are, but I don't think that there's anything different from what they do than what any one of us is capable of doing. They just had a calling and a mission and did it, and
Yes.
had the courage to follow through and do it. So again, they followed their sense of what felt right within themselves. They aligned with that truth, and then they acted from that truth, and they created massive change. But every single person can do that. And it doesn't have to be in this massive scale, but if you act in a certain way that's in alignment with, in my mind, that's alignment with source, that's alignment with truth, you're becoming a hero for people around you. And our acronym for HERO means how experiences reflect on others. And so every single person can be a hero to somebody else just by the way they live their life. But so much of it is I feel like we're not fully living our life. In a lot of ways, I feel like we're almost living somebody else's life a little bit. And this is a big part of it is like what I said, when we even moved and made these big changes, like sometimes you just have to do stuff that changes things up, that allows you to feel like you're living your life and you're not living your life for somebody else. So often I think people go their whole life not really jazzed about their life or not really excited about it. And it actually sort of just keeps getting them down more and more. They get more grumpy or irritable or depressed until they retire, and then they try to figure out at that point, what do I even like? What do I even like to do? Like I just feel like we get so disconnected from it. So that part is kind of the idea of all of us matter, and that as every single person connects to it, you will have an impact on the consciousness of the planet. That's a fact. That will happen. And also, the more that you live from a certain place, that ripples out and you affect other people around you. So it's like Wayne Dyer had that book, Law of Intention, or he talked about the power of intention, I think was his book. And he talked about basically he would go back to his family dynamic at Christmas, and it was the same story over and over and over again. They'd fight about the same things, nobody got along, it'd end up in a big fight, and everybody would go back home. And so he had the intention that he was going to go and hold a certain place of intention, that he was going to see basically the good in everybody while he was there, and he wasn't going to waver from that. And when he went there, the whole dynamic changed. Like he didn't react to certain things, he saw it differently. You create a field. And again, when people get out of thinking of just physical chemistry and you start to think of vibrational medicine and frequency and electromagnetic fields, you emit a field off the heart that extends outwards of about 8 feet and probably much more. We just can't measure it yet. And that affects and interacts with people around you. And if you can hold a certain state, you can open up the door for other people to entrain to that same state. And if they can entrain to that and move up to that same frequency, well, guess what? They're going to start to feel different. Now they're going to interact with people in a different way. And that's kind of like the premise behind the book, that if we can get people to really embody a feeling of appreciation and gratitude, they become gratitude. They become that ripple. And then from there, they affect everybody else around them. And in turn, opens up a door for those people to connect to that same feeling. And that's where the ripple just keeps going. And ultimately, that's what you're going to start to bring more back in your life, because that's part of this like attracts like.
Yes, and some of the ascended masters gave us a very good example. Said you are the drop of water, but at the same time you are the ocean. You are part of the ocean. So alone you might be insignificant, but together you have power. You can move mountains, you know. So we should keep that in mind, especially in these, trying times.
Well, and I think it's even more important during the trying times. Like when I think about it, when we want more courage, or we want more compassion, or we, all of these things we want, like, I really don't think God just kind of comes down, or source, or whoever you want to sort of look at it. I don't think they just come down and make you feel more loving or make you feel compassionate. They're going to give you opportunities to rise up into it yourself and find it. That's the only way it's going to happen. It's like, you have to, because it has to come from within. So it's not going to be this magical thing where you just go and all of a sudden you feel better. You have to create it. You have to look for it. And that's where it's hard. That's like during the hard times is where all of the real essence of things comes out. If you can see the hard times and act in spite of the hard times, that's where I think the real transformations start to happen for people, and you become it, right? You kind of overcome some of these challenges and you rise above them.
Yeah, living by example is very important. And in my book, I mention an old Indian man who started to clean up the dirty river going beside his hut. And in fact, it's a real example. I mean, I heard it on the news, and he did it by himself for, 6-7 months. And then people notice his results, his work, and then they join him. And I think in 2 years, that river was just something unbelievable. Like 10-15 years before, it was muddied up. So again, you really have to take initiative and be inspired in order to create the example which others will follow.
Yeah, I think so too.
There is something very interesting in your book at the beginning, which I would like you to read for us if possible. Really inspired me, and I think it will do the same for the viewers.
The quote from Mother Teresa, is that the one you're thinking about?
I think so, yes.
So in the book, we were reading the works of different people that we really like. So some of the people that we were looking at were people like Martin Luther King and Gandhi and Rosa Parks, and some of the work by Mother Teresa. And just sort of looking at, some of these people that seem to make a big impact in the world, and where did they come from, and what was their message. And so we've got quotes from some of these people throughout the book. And this one I really like, because it's kind of this idea. I think a lot of times we sometimes get these inklings to do something. And especially even for us that are I think in a lot of words, like, these light workers that want to come in and create some positive change in the world, which ultimately is the positive change that starts within us. I don't, it's like, I remember David Hawkins saying, don't worry about the world's fine. Fix yourself. Like, that was really it. And I take that message to heart. But I think what happens is the more you work on those things within yourself, there's a natural outreach that gets spawns out of that. And then you want to sort of create certain things, right? It's like you notice what helps you, and then you want to help others. And even the book that came out of that, it was my personal experience from writing letters of gratitude to my karate instructor and to my grandma, and how much that impacted me. And then even 10 years later, how much that impacted my grandma. Like, I remember going back when I had written the book, 10 years after I'd first sent her a letter of gratitude, just telling her how much of a hero she was in my life. And I went back to visit her. She was at an older age home at that time near my sister. And I went and stayed with her for a few days. And I took the draft of the book and I was reading it to her. I said, Grandma, do you remember when I sent you that letter 10 years ago, just saying thank you for being that hero for me? I said, this is the book that came out of that. And she just nodded her head. She went over, pulled open the drawer, and pulled out the letter that I'd written her 10 years ago. And she said she still reads it every night before bed, and it still brings tears of joy to her eyes. And like, I was just like floored at that point, sort of thinking like, holy cow, it took me to act on an impulse of love and gratitude, and how much got out of that for like 10 years, the return on that for my grandma. I mean, these are the things that when we act from this place of love and gratitude, and we have the willingness and the action to do it, you just don't know how far it's going to go. And so it kind of ties me to Mother Teresa's quote, which says, do good anyways. Because I think a lot of times we don't act because we kind of think we're just this small person and it's not going to have a big impact. But Mother Teresa's quote says, people are unreasonable, illogical, and self-centered. Love them anyways. If you do good, people may accuse you of selfish motives. Do good anyways. If you are successful, you may win false friends and true enemies. Succeed anyway. The good you do today may be forgotten tomorrow. Do good anyway. Honesty and transparency make you vulnerable. Be honest and transparent anyway. When you spent years building, what you spent years building may be destroyed overnight. Build anyway. People who really want to help may attack you if you help them. Help them anyway. Give the world the best you have, and you may get hurt. Give the world your best anyway. It's such a beautiful quote because it's this idea that not everything has to manifest in a way that we think it does in the physical world. Just by doing good, you're creating shift in the world that often I think we just can't even perceive. My feeling is like, at some point when we cross over, maybe we get a picture of the whole big picture. I think that would be kind of fun to see. But when we're living here on planet Earth, I think that we see a small piece of this massive picture. And because we can't see past that, we often think nothing else exists. But if there's a faith and trust that there's just more, there's always more, then that's where you act anyways, knowing that it's going out somewhere. And if it resonates with you and it feels good inside you, and the intent and the mission behind it is from a positive state of consciousness, do it. Whatever it is, whether 2 people read it or 10 people or 1 million people read it, it's like you're still putting that frequency out into the global consciousness.
Yes, I'm convinced that we will be able to see the big picture when we ascend. That's for sure. We have to. I mean, this is what, again, ascending masters said, that you're gonna have a different point of view when you go up there.
It's totally true. I think of ascension and levels of consciousness just like climbing up a mountain. And it's not that the lower part of the mountain is any worse or better than the higher part of the mountain, but the view is going to be inherently different. What you see down at the bottom of the mountain is very different than what you're going to see at the top. You're going to gradually keep getting more expansive vistas of what's happening. And this is why it's people's perspective can change when you keep moving through different levels of consciousness, because you see more, and then you recognize more. So it's like if I were to say, no, there's a whole huge flower bed over here, and the person that's, because I'm seeing it, and the person that's on the mountain that's on the ledge just below kind of goes, there's no flower bed over there, I don't see anything but dirt. But as soon as they get up, it's like, oh, now I see it. And then you don't have to work at trying to change your perspective. It's an inherent process of changes in consciousness.
Yes, and another simple analogy is you read a book today, and then you go on with your life, and a month or 2 months later you come back, you read the book again, and it gives you more insight because you have a different perspective at life. So that's why.
Yeah, I love books like that too, where you can keep reading them and you keep gaining something else, because as you continually evolve and grow, you pick up different pieces that resonate with you at that point in time in those books. Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah. Jason, how your spiritual daily routine has changed over the years? Did you discard some of the steps? Did you add new ones?
I think probably the biggest shift for me over the last while is to have more fun with it. So my kind of intellectual brain was very much rooted in, I needed a process, I needed to know how to do it. It was more of an intellectual process of trying to get to spirituality. And I think that all I was doing was actually putting up my own roadblocks for it, because that's not really how spirituality happens. So for me, it came down to, I needed to create my life more in the arena of more downtime, more sort of out of fight or flight, more in rest and digest. And it wasn't that I was like a hugely stressful person or anything, but because that's a real high up priority for us, because it very much intersects with joy, is that then that just meant I needed to be in an environment that allowed that to happen more naturally. And even in my meditations, like, so I'll meditate regularly. My wife and I meditate pretty much every night. We will also practice contemplation, I think, on a regular basis. I kind of feel like meditation is just nice to be immersed in a space where you can just connect and you can slow things down, and however you want to do it. I do a lot of work with my pineal, just sort of allowing that to kind of open. And I spend less time trying to almost like convince myself to do something or convince my guides it's a good idea to do something or whatever. It's more just kind of stating it as, this is what I'm open and receptive to, and leave it at that, and then have trust that that's what's going to happen, as opposed to trying to, it's just, we're so used to having to work for things. I think that's probably a good way to describe it. We are so used to having to work hard to get good results. And I feel like that needs to be flipped upside down. I feel like it's not that you don't work at things, but I wouldn't even use the term work anymore. I feel like that's a block in itself. It's more like, rather than hard work, it would be like smart work. It's like just sort of knowing that certain things are going to take place and trusting that process rather than trying to earn it on a certain way. Do you know what I mean?
Yes, and I can tell you from my own experience, only recently I realized how powerful my analytical mind is and how much it can block
Yeah.
my inner self. It is just unbelievable. It's like a metal door. Sometimes it's impossible to break through. It's so afraid to move aside and let us be ourselves. It's unbelievable.
I totally get it. And in some ways, the more education I've had was the biggest blocks to get out of what I had been sort of pre-indoctrinated with, right? So I've been indoctrinated with certain concepts that were truths that then I had to kind of break gradually apart to kind of say, well, maybe it's not the full truth. And, I'd be so quick to kind of go, oh, well, that's because of this or this or this. And now I kind of check, oh, there's another program that's running. And that may be true in one area, but it's definitely not the whole truth. And in some days, it might even be completely wrong at another point. So I think that sort of piece of it, of just being okay with letting go of what our beliefs that we hold strongly, whatever we think we know for sure, that actually creates some limitation on our world, we have to be willing to let that go and stretch that out a little bit. I think in general, like, to me, it's like if I'm connecting more to like divinity or divine will, the feeling is very different. I feel more humility around it. I don't feel like I'm right and they're wrong. It feels a sense of unity and interconnection with people, and compassion naturally arises out of it. When I am coming from my analytical side or my intellectual brain, I generally find that this feels like a bit more of like sides, like I know and you don't know, or that sort of thing. Which generally then creates more division and separation. And I don't usually feel a sense of compassion. I feel more of a sense of probably more like right and wrong, right? More judgment. More judgment would be tied in that than with compassion, interconnection. And I could say the biggest example for me for that was when I became a parent. Prior to being a parent, I felt like I intellectually knew what was supposed to happen with your kids. And especially if I was looking at it from, say, like an eating perspective, like I just knew because of what I had read and what I had understood. And so when parents would talk to me about that and they weren't able to do certain things, I could tell, even though I still would have an aspect of compassion, but there'd be a big part of me that was like, no, this is just what you need to do. This is the right part. And I could feel all those same things. There was like, I'm right, you're not right. There might be a little bit of judgment around like, you're not doing it the way that's going to be in the best interest or whatever. And I felt less compassion and more probably superiority is probably what it felt like. After having kids, that flipped that completely upside down. I had a real knowingness of what that experience was like. And now when parents tell me they're having troubles with their diet with their kids, doesn't mean there's certain things that are probably in the best interest, but it feels completely different. I get it now. Now I have a ton of compassion for parents. I have a feeling that more I'm on the same page with them and we're interconnected. And I have no judgment for them because I get how tricky it can be. And it just comes up as compassion. And I feel united with them and they feel that from me. So, it's like that came from more of an inner sense of knowing rather than an intellectual knowing.
Yes.
And so those are the ways that I kind of separate it, is it feels like that. And when it's an inner knowing and which I think connects more with divinity, when you are feeling that it's expansive, it interconnects, there's no judgment, there's compassion, like you're in the right field.
Yes, indeed. Jason, I would like to give some food for thought, give my viewers some food for thought, and I'll ask you a tough question. What will you do if these two hypothetical scenarios come into play? You have only 24 hours to live, but everyone else is fine, and everyone else in the world has 24 hours to live. What will be your approach?
What would I do if I had 24 hours to live and the rest of the world was fine? So like I got diagnosed with something or whatever was going to happen and my time was coming up.
God will come and say, you have to come.
Without question, I would spend that time with my family. Both of them, I think I would spend that time with my family either way. It would be probably not a lot different than a lot of what my days are like right now. It would be I'd be jumping on the trampoline with my girls. I would just be very, very present, more so than I probably am to this day, because very quickly you would realize how extraneous 99.9% of our life is and what really you value, which is almost always comes down to heart connections with real people.
Thank you. Beautiful. Any other projects around the book you are doing right now?
So big movement on the book right now, because I just think now is the time. I think part of what we can help with the world climate at the moment is that when we can get into higher states of consciousness, it allows us to connect. It allows us to see the world from different perspectives. And that's really my intention behind the book, is why I think right now it's so needed. We are doing a big push where we would like people to read the book, or if you go to the website at www.lettersthatmovetheworld.com, You will be able to see the website, and it's just a simple website. But I interviewed my co-author Corey Ashley, and we broke down almost all of the main chapters just for free. They're all there. They'll give you a gist of the whole process. And then you can get the ebook off of Kindle. You could buy the book. I've created an online course that you can get through the courses section on the Inspire Health Podcast website, which is just inspirehealthpodcast.com. It'll give people all the ideas. So whatever venue people need to kind of embrace it. Some people like reading a book. Some people like an interactive course that I take them through. Everything's very inexpensive. It's just to try and get it out. And you could even just watch the videos and not have to buy anything, but you would get the feel for it all.
Jason.
But the goal is that if we can get people to do this between sort of December 21st, which is kind of winter solstice, is a really big light point coming up that we can piggyback off of this sort of cosmic kind of shift that's going on in the world. And we want to get people to basically write letters and then send the letters out between December 21st and January 7th. So we keep this ongoing ripple of gratitude that's just coming out, coming out, coming out. And let's just see if we can lift the vibration of the planet a little bit. And that's our big picture.
Perfect. So we'll help for sure. We'll put the links up on our show in the description and on my social media for people to find out and write their letters.
Yeah, it's a great process. If anybody hasn't done that, just start now making your list of people. And the book takes you through even how to do that and who to even look at for letters. And sometimes you're surprised at who the people even are and some of the different ways that you can do it. But yeah, we can all move the world together.
Yeah, and those who are in their 20s and 30s, they have to know that when we are young, we used to write letters and physical letters and send them out to friends and family. And
yeah, well, I remember waiting.
Handwrite.
Yeah, I remember waiting for those letters. And the process now, it's like when I do it, I will write the letters because I like that process. But even in today, it's like you've got options. You could write an email. You could do an e-card. You could do a video of saying it and send it to them. So it's like the concept of letters is how it was originally done, but you can literally do it in whichever way resonates with you. The goal is to share the gift of your own heart. That's what the goal is.
Yes, I mean, even today I write my books on the notepad first and then goes on the computer. So I really like to use my hands.
That's because we're old school, Claude.
Yes. Jason, it's been a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Thanks so much.
And for my viewers, please share this video, subscribe to the channel. And you can also support me on patreon.com/Claudiu Murgan. I post specific content there, which doesn't go on any other social media channel. Until next time, love and gratitude.